Hey everybody, I'm Gregory Brown. I'm a Ruby hacker and I'm actually the guy behind the Ruby Mendicant University, which is this free online training program for people who want to get better at programming in Ruby and sort of software development in general. Um, so I've been working on this program for a couple months now. It all started with a blog post that I made throwing the idea out there, and then I took some donations for a couple $1,000s to make some material. And for the last about month and a half now that I've actually been teaching classes, we've had about 25 students take sessions so far, and it's been an interesting experience. So I was looking for a way to express the ideas that I've been having about this and sort of keep people up to date with what's going on. And I usually do things like blogging and writing for stuff like this, but this idea is just sort of way bigger than what I can keep in my head, and when I write, it takes me a really long time to express all the thoughts that I could have about this. So I'm trying something a little bit different this time around by doing videos, and I'm going to try it as an experiment for a few days and see how it works. I'm not really used to doing video-based blogging, but we'll see how it goes. Just right now, my head is so full with thoughts that it's really hard for me to sit down and write without a single paragraph taking me hours and hours. So here's the idea. Every weekday, I'm going to try and sit down and talk for 10 minutes. I'm going to set this timer, and this stuff may be a little discontinuous. It may be rough around the edges, and it might sort of seem like a ramble, but I really want to get these ideas out there as much as I can, and I want to be able to interact with others and sort of get some of their input and just sort of see where it goes. So um, that's where we're at. Um, so anyway, might as well give some background into how things have been going so far. In August, we did a pilot session with 7 students, and 4 of them completed the program and received alumni status, which is sort of the gold star sticker for doing everything up to expectations that I had. Of course, this is a pilot program, and I probably set the material up in a way that was pretty tough. So I was actually really impressed that we had 4 people pass completely. But you know, the other 3 are working on finishing up their requirements as part of the September stuff. Everybody in that course really helped me figure out what sort of material we should be doing in the course, which is really great. As you can see, I'm already sort of rambling here, but I guess that's the nature of how this is going to be. Right now in September, this is our first official session, and we have 18 students working through material that is sort of inspired by but different from what the people in August did. RMU is kind of unique as a technical training program because it's aimed more towards people who already more or less know how to program or know a bit about the Ruby language, but that really want to get good at it and really want to understand it, and also want to be able to put it to good use for the sorts of things that they're interested in. There's way too many people in the world that know how to program, but don't quite have the core understanding necessary to really build things on their own. And I think that's really sad. I mean, the greatest fun that we can have in coding is, you know, building our own things from the ground up, or solving problems that might not have been solved before, or at least not in the way that we're looking at it, and those sort of things, and or being able to express new ideas or play with sort of things that are on the fringe. And when we're pretty much limited to putting together bits and pieces of code that other people have built, or copy and pasting code into place to get it to run. I mean, I'm sure that it works as a day job for a lot of people, but it doesn't bring the sort of joy and passion that you can get from really hacking and getting to understand systems and things like that. So in a sense, RMU is meant to create an environment that encourages people to experience the joys of hacking. And I'm, of course, talking about hacking in the sense of being curious and getting things to work in a way that they weren't necessarily designed to, or just playing around with ideas and not the sort of breaking into people's email accounts and things like that. So hacking in the old sense of the word. But anyway, pretty much everybody in the Ruby community will understand what that means. And what we've been doing is we've really just been working on problems. It's kind of tough even to get into these courses because everybody who is taking them now took an entrance exam a couple months ago, which I reviewed every single one of those, and basically everybody who took it passed, but I think that a lot of people didn't bother to take it because they didn't necessarily want to work on the problem. And the problem was memory optimization for doing undo-redo functionality for text editing, which, I mean, it shows you that this sort of caliber of people who are just getting into this program in the first place at least know their way around enough to tackle a problem like that. But it's not really about making people, or limiting it to a group of elite people who already know all of this amazingly complex stuff. It's more people who are willing to really think through and work on interesting problems. And as a part of that, before anyone starts their sessions, these are 3-week sessions that we're running, and we're booked up through the end of 2010. But before anybody starts, about a couple weeks before they start their session, they have to propose an individual project to work on throughout the 3-week period. And this is, so far, pretty much everybody has done open source projects for this. It doesn't have to be open source, but they have to be willing to discuss it with me and with the other students. But the idea is that they pitch a project idea themselves. And some of these have been, extensions to existing open source projects. Others have been people who wanted to build little games or experiment with other things. Some have even been documentation projects, though that's a little bit tricky and sort of depends on the case as to whether I would accept things like that. But in general, it's really, really cool. I'll try to put together a list of the stuff that people have been working on so far. But for example, in September, we got 18 people. That means that there's 18 new projects that are being worked on. Now, I don't necessarily expect them in a 3-week period of time to build something that's going to break major ground, but it's at the very least taking someone and asking them to come up with something that they're interested in, having that pass through someone like myself who's fairly experienced with this stuff to make sure that it's realistic, that they can make some progress on it, and then letting them execute on it. And I think that that's a really, really great foundation for the course, because it means that throughout the entire course there's a real problem to be solved. That's something that the student selected. And that means that the whole course becomes about that in a sense. But of course, I also wanted to give people problems that I've assigned to them, because that's going to expose them to the sort of ideas that they need to do. And we do 3 projects in the 3-week session. Students are allowed to skip one. The projects are not trivial. Some of them are relatively straightforward, like in the August session, we had people building IRC bots that interacted with a web service of their choosing, just to do something interesting. So, some people made things where if you type in an IP address on IRC, it would give you back the address. Someone made a connection to Yelp so that you can say something like bars in New Haven and then get lists back of the highly rated bars or whatever. I mean, that's the general idea. And in September, we did an exercise similar to that where people built Twitter bots. So same idea, where they're connecting to some third-party service and then allowing people to interact with it through Twitter. It's a simple enough exercise, but it exposes people to something that could be seen as a real or useful project. Now, we always try to hit a data modeling problem, and those have been pretty hairy. I'll release a couple of them soon to the public, but they're big enough problems to make it so that they're things that either I've worked on or have wanted to work on that I knew would trip me up. So the idea there is to help people work with challenges that may be a little bit too complicated for them, and then get them to box it in to a point where they would understand it. And that's a really great experience. I think that both in the August and September session, that's been the most thing that's questioned their motivation. It's really challenged them in a way that made them feel sort of emotionally frustrated with it. But at the same time, at the end of it, when we talk through it, I think that people are gaining some inspiration to be able to work with those sort of problems, which is awesome. Um, and then the third problem that we've run is more oriented towards either technical writing or education or something like that. So in August, we ran something encouraging people to come up with programming problems or quizzes that we can run. And we're running those internally inside of RMU now, and we'll release them publicly, something like the Ruby quiz, something like that. And the September students right now are working on tutorials for Ruby Standard Library. So when you add those three things together, you get something that gets into sort of heavy data modeling, and then the bot problem is sort of a nuts and bolts service integration thing, and then the more writing-oriented aspect of things gets people into technical communication. You add those three things together, and I think that you're getting a pretty good core exposure to the sort of things that a masterful programmer would need to know. And in addition to that, we do final exams, which I'm not really talking about that right now, but soon we'll release both of the final exams within the next few weeks. And those are modeling problems in general. And while most of the problems we do in RMU allow people to sort of collaborate on, that's the only thing that doesn't. So there's really not much I can say about it right now. But the whole idea is that when you add all of that stuff together, people are basically working on 5 different projects in the course of 3 weeks, which is a lot of work to do in a short period of time. And so far, the 25 students that have been in this program have been just eating it up and going crazy with it. And I am absolutely inspired to see how just giving people the right sort of problems to work on allows them to really start to kick ass. And in a period of 3 weeks, see people make radical changes in their craft simply by working on problems and then discussing them in a sort of organized context with someone who can give them some guidance has been amazing. And there's a lot more that I would have wanted to say tonight, but I'm going to try and stick to these time limits. So that's the first little talk like this. I'll be back again tomorrow with another one. Thanks.